I'm Travis Brown, founder and CEO of Mojo Up Marketing and Media. And this is my podcast where I talk to the most successful Black and brown business executives who've broken through the barriers of today's business culture. Mojo Up, Mojo Up, Mojo Up Live. My name is Travis Brown, and I'm super excited to bring you another episode of Mojo Up Live. But today is not like any other episode. Today is a very special episode because I have a very special guest. I got the one and only and the first Chief Equity Inclusion Officer for the state of Indiana, appointed by the governor, Miss Karrah.
Hello, it's good to see you.
Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm super excited because, you know, I knew about you and I got connected to you and I've got to know you and meet you and so much fun. But I'm going to start our conversation today with this first question is, like, you are in a super high profile position, a first. You still represent an only. So what was it like when you got potentially maybe the call, the email, the text of maybe at that point in time, like the biggest job of your life?
Yeah, it was cool. So what happened was my dad, who is close to someone who was formerly on the cabinet for Governor Holcomb, he got a phone call from him and he said, the governor's standing up this new initiative. We think Karrah might be a really good person to consider. And I was like 6 months pregnant at the time. So I said, no, I'm probably not really ready to leave Notre Dame. I'm pregnant. I'm about to go on maternity leave. But once I had a conversation with the governor's team about what the role was, I'm like, wow, first, wow, that they're considering me. And then the second part was, wow, what an impact this role will have on the state of Indiana, my home state. So I went ahead and threw my name in the hat.
Now we're going to come back and we're going to dig in deep into this, but I gotta figure out this. So you're from South Bend, Indiana.
That's right.
But you are decided not to go to Notre Dame, which I absolutely love. Go to Purdue,
yes.
Valparaiso, back in South Bend, but no real Irish ties besides you go to work there.
Yep.
Like, walk me through that whole thought process.
Yeah, so there was no thought process behind it, truly. It was really a faith move. So I'm a firm believer in praying about everything that I do. Even at a young age, I always wanted to make sure that I was in the will of God for my life. I'm the daughter of pastors, so our faith has driven much of what we do in our family. And so Purdue was a deliberate choice, right? I went and visited different colleges. I was thinking about an HBCU, and my parents were like, nah, you're staying in state. We're paying for this. You're going to a state school. So it was Purdue. But then I was really trying to figure out my senior year if I wanted to go off and do public relations and communications in Chicago, or if I wanted to go ahead and go to law school. And ended up going to law school about a year after I graduated from Purdue, a couple years after I graduated from Purdue. And I was going to work at a law firm. And I had a friend call me and say, there's this position at Notre Dame that's open, and I think you should consider it. And I was just like, okay, I'll do this for 6 months while I'm studying for the bar. Got there, got promoted again, and then I got sucked into the Notre Dame bubble. And I was there for almost 10 years. And so that's where I ended up meeting my husband, who is an Irishman. He went to Notre Dame, played for Charlie Weiss. And so we're very connected to the Notre Dame community. I just don't have that degree. I am a Purdue girl through and through, so.
I love to hear that. We joke in our office all the time about Boiler Up and the Boilers and the Hoosiers and all that stuff. So great to see that you are a Boiler.
Yeah.
I want to dig in a little bit though, your career path, you know, to get you to this point. Because this isn't a job that just anybody can get and anybody can hold, and there's a lot of, I'm sure, pressure with that. So what was the journey to get to this point, and did you feel like you were ready?
I don't know if you ever feel ready when that big opportunity, shows up. But when I was at Notre Dame, the first couple years, I was in legal compliance. So my team oversaw Title IX, Title VII, workplace investigations of harassment, discrimination, all of the sexual assault cases on campus. So that was a difficult role. I was in that arena for about 5.5 years. And I went to my VP and I said, listen, I love doing this work. It's quasi-legal. I went to law school to do some type of legal work. But if people see my team coming, they know something went wrong. They know that a policy was violated or someone's about to get terminated or there's some kind of sanction that's going to be in place. So I said, I would love to get back into my public relations space, which is what my undergraduate degree is in communications from Purdue. And so they created what was called the Director of Public Affairs role for me. And what that was strictly community engagement, looking at our economic impact to the region. I was partnering with folks across the region, whether they were in local government or they were a nonprofit or the private sector. And I will tell you, it was probably both of those roles that really prepared me for this position I didn't even know I was going to take. When you think about the legal compliance of looking at harassment and discrimination and workplace culture, and then you marry that with the ability to be a stakeholder who can like build bridges for other stakeholders, marrying all these different types of resources from one nonprofit to the next and looking at Notre Dame's economic impact, it all fits into what this job that I'm doing today is all about. I didn't know it at the time. Right. He knew it, but he was kind of preparing me along the way.
Well, you mentioned your faith, and I think, part of my journey has been the same way. It's like all the little things that were struggles, were fights, things that I thought were like, why am I going through this? Yep. Why am I dealing with this? Looking at the setbacks and the disappointments, it's like, man. And then you realize several years later, like this is how God was really preparing you to deal with what you're doing. And so now you're in this role. Talk to me about what this role really is, and what's the body of work that you're trying to accomplish.
For sure, it's a big job, and there are days where I'm like, what was I thinking when I said yes to this? But it's really a fantastic role, and at the heart of it, the governor really wanted someone to come in and look at how our 30,000 strong workforce is experiencing the workplace culture, looking at how we are recruiting, retaining, and developing talent from a diversity standpoint, making sure that women and people of color have the same opportunities to advance through state government as others, but also making sure that there's this atmosphere of inclusion and acceptance and belonging. But the bigger part of the job, and that's a big part of the job, and the bigger part is really looking at Indiana's culture statewide and how are Hoosiers getting access to opportunities? How are we employing equity so that gaps in housing, gaps in food scarcity, gaps in education and economic development start to shrink so that we can shrink that wealth gap so that all Hoosiers have access to the tools they need to live their best quality of life. That's a really big job. And it's not one that anyone can come in and solve within a couple of years. It's gonna take some time. I tell people, we got here from years and years of policy that didn't always include everyone. So it's gonna take some years for us to catch up to where people feel like they actually have a seat and a voice at the table.
So here's a tough question. How are we doing?
Yeah, we're doing pretty good. We have a lot of opportunity for improvement. I would say our biggest opportunities for improvement right now that our team is laser focused on is in the education space and then in the economic development space. I'm a firm believer that there is a strong nexus between education and then outcomes later in life as far as economic development, health outcomes. I mean, the data shows that you live 12 years longer in this state than people if you have a college degree and you go on and you have some type of an employment based on that college degree than people that have less than a high school diploma. So it's really important that we start to look at how are we preparing our first graders, our second graders, our third graders with literacy, with math, with science, with STEM, all of those things. And then making sure that there's a plan after high school, either to go on and get some type of a certification, to go into an apprenticeship, or to go to a 4-year or 2-year institution. Because in that case, when they do that, then they can get these jobs that are higher wage paying jobs. They can actually become homeowners or get into good housing. They can support their family. They have better health outcomes. All of those things are tied together. And so I think we have a huge opportunity right now with all of the learning loss that happened during COVID, especially for our Black and our brown students and our students with disabilities, to really start to close those gaps. And I'm working really closely with the Secretary of Education, Dr. Katie Jenner, and her team to look at how we do that.
And I guess my question in that is, I think some people feel like there's a narrative that we're talking about how important these things are, but when it comes to dispersing our money to help solve these, then we get a little gun shy. I mean, is that actual reality, or is that just because that's a perception that's clouded by lenses?
Yeah, it's a perception that's clouded by lenses. I think Indiana is doing a fantastic job of really putting money towards these initiatives. I'll give you 2 examples. The Department of Education just got $111 million from Lilly and some others to really focus on literacy in our state. And I will tell you, our Black and brown students, our students with disabilities, we have to get them reading at the level they need to be by 2nd, 3rd grade, or we will lose them. And so this $111 million investment into the Department of Education is huge. And then just on a side note, the Department of Education invested $1 million into my office to help us work directly with La Plaza and La Casa and the Urban League and the NAACP and different partners across the state to make sure that we're getting these resources around this new $111 million out to the families who need it the most. And so they're funding our initiatives to really expand access to these new services that will be available. So there are people that are writing checks and they're putting them towards the right initiatives. I just think because we are pretty humble as Hoosiers in the state of Indiana, we don't always talk about those things, but we have to get those stories out there more.
Well, I got an easy solution. There's a marketing company that I know that's really good at telling stories.
Is it Mojo Up? It's on my chair somewhere.
and in all seriousness, it is about telling that story. And I always feel like, whether it's companies or government, individual personal brands, things like that, sometimes we struggle in telling that story.
Sure.
You mentioned the humility. Most of us have grown up at some level saying, don't toot your own horn. And there is an element in marketing that is exactly that. It's actually tooting your own horn. In other words, telling people who you are and what you're doing and how you're doing it. Let's talk about when you took this job. I think it's safe to say that not everybody was supportive.
It's very safe to say that.
Not everybody was supportive. And even people that you think might have been supportive weren't supportive. What did that take to start trying to tell the story, have the conversations, mend the fences, reshape, what people were really thinking?
The first thing it took was a lot of wisdom and resilience, because it's very easy to take things personally in this job. But my father told me, he said, Karrah, you have to take your job seriously, but you have to work really hard not to take it personally. Because a lot of times people are upset about the title or the role or who it reports to or what it's been designed to do. They don't know you. They've never really met you. They haven't been with you on your journey through your life. It's really the position that they're upset about. And so I have to spend a lot of time in meditation and in prayer by myself just to make sure that I have on the armor that I need to have on, so that when I go out there and I hear these negative comments, or I see an article and people are like lighting me and the governor up in the comment section with these horrible comments, that I can handle that but still do the job. And so what I did, I was very intentional about...
Hold on, do you read them?
I don't read them. When I first got the appointment, I was on Instagram, and there was like 800 likes on this picture that they posted of me about the appointment. And a couple people were tagging me, so I was responding to a couple folks I know, and I saw a couple of the comments. This was back in November of 2020. And some of them were just so racist and mean and sexist, and that I said, I won't read comments from now on. Now, I do have team members who read them, and they're like, did you see it? I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Don't talk to me about it. I'm in a good mood today. I just worked out. I ran a mile. I don't, whatever. So I don't read them anymore, but I know they're out there.
Because, I had this, and when I was a motivational speaker early on, I'm from Lafayette, and my hometown newspaper did this big article on me. And it was, about Travis Brown doing all this great work to help kids and adults. And, I was kind of feeling it. And then one of my buddies texted me and said, did you see that comment? I'm like, what comment? I didn't see it, right? And so then you kind of go look, and then all of a sudden I saw like the little bash session. I'm like, hold on a second. I'm out here trying to do good, help people, make a difference. And they were bringing up old shit. Like, here's what he did when he was in junior high. Here's what he did in high school. Did you know this? And here's what happened to his first marriage. Like, I mean, and I was so taken back by the fact that people would go that far out of their way to spread so much negativity and hate. And then I heard President Obama say this one point in time. He said, I can't run around trying to defend everybody's everything, because that's all I'll ever have time doing. And that helped me change my mindset around, listen, people are going to say what they're going to say.
They're going to say it.
But it's still got to hurt and sting every once in a while.
It does. It sucks. And I will tell you, I have a couple people on my team that I can go to, but really I'm grateful for my husband and my parents. They are a really good ear and a good sounding board for me. I can be a bit of a hothead. I'm a little better now that I'm older. But I'm like, hey, I want to respond. There was one time this person wrote an article, and I told the governor, I said, I want to respond. And he's like, no, you can't respond to that. He's like, you'll be responding, like President Obama said, you'll be responding to that all the time. Just do the work and let the work speak for itself. And so what I've done is I've been pretty intentional about trying to build relationships with folks, especially those who were a little bit, there was some trepidation about the role within the Black community. Like, is this for real? This is a Republican governor setting this up. Is this person a pawn?
She's a token.
She's a token. She's not going to do anything. And so I had to be really intentional about being patient with those comments and building relationships. And a lot of those folks have become really great partners in the work. And so that's been positive. But,
How did you cross, and I say cross lines because being appointed by a Republican, governor, there are those people that are asking all those questions. There are, schools of people that you thought like I'm the first Black woman to be in this position, like surely they're going to support me. And then you find out that they don't. But you had some of those people that didn't support you but do now. What did it take to kind of change that perspective?
It took time and it took patience and it took me sitting down to hear their perspective, to understand that there was baggage there with a lot of things that have happened in Indianapolis. You know, I'm from South Bend. I still live in South Bend. So I have an apartment that I use during the week that's in Carmel, but I still live in South Bend. So the culture of the lack of opportunities or folks feeling like there were crabs in a barrel and people would get up there and then they would try to pull others down. I wasn't familiar with that. So I needed to listen and learn and try to empathize with what the feelings were around this. And that took time. I mean, that was really the first year of me getting into this role. People are like, I know you're going to change the world. And I'm like, let's just start having some conversations first. And let me figure out where the bathroom is in the State House. Let's just start there. Right. And so we had to do that. But it's been worth it because a lot of those people now are allies in this work and they are supportive. And if I need something, I can pick up the phone and call them. If they need something, they can pick up the phone and call me. But it took time, just building those relationships.
In this role, you speak all the time.
I do. That's why I used to be a singer. I used to do like theater and drama and all that stuff in high school, and even in law school I was in the musical. When you talk all the time, your singing voice really takes a hit. So I don't get to sing as much anymore, which makes me sad.
But you know all the techniques, right? All the things you're supposed to do.
I know. But when you're talking all day long, it just kind of goes out the door.
I was going to say, so you speak a lot and you're in different environments. Any of them been intimidating, or ones you're like, I'm actually nervous to go do this today?
Never really intimidated because I've been on stage like my whole life, but there was one time, and it was a chamber dinner. I was asked to give remarks, and the governor was introducing me via video because he had to travel. And so I'm like, I was fairly newer in the role, and I didn't really know what I was walking into. And I get to the Indiana Roof Ballroom, and there was like 600 plus people. And it was mainly legislators and elected officials and appointed officials. Had no idea what I was walking into. And it was a dinner, but the head table was on the stage. So not only did I have to speak, I had to sit up there in front of all of these legislators, some of whom were not happy about my role. And I had to speak and talk about what the office was doing. Wasn't necessarily intimidated, but I was like, whoa, I got to get this one right. And so that was a moment in time where I'm like, okay, this is a serious opportunity for me to really share what we're working on and what we aren't working on. Because there was a lot of misunderstanding around what this role was intended to be and what it actually is.
But isn't that always the case? It's
always.
It's like if you would take time to really understand what we're trying to do. I mean, are we really going to have conversations that we don't believe that everybody should have the same level of education and opportunities?
Right.
And like when you start unpacking that, you're going, but you're missing it. Like you're truly missing that. Let me ask you this. So I grew up in Lafayette in the 70s and 90s, and I grew up. I never saw a black doctor, lawyer, professional. My parents worked at a factory. My aunt and uncles worked at factories. Super hardworking, but I never saw like this opportunity to be this. How do there's a lot of black and brown kids that are still doing that. How do we change it? How do we show them? How do we create that environment that they can be Karrahs out there?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in storytelling because our kids are watching the LeBron Jameses of the world, and sometimes the ones we don't necessarily want them to watch. Some of the entertainers and artists that are putting out messaging that really isn't conducive to the types of communities we want to build. And so they're watching that. And that's why a lot of them, they want to be singers or rappers or ball players because that's what they see. But when you start to put things in front of them that they were unaware, like, oh, I can be a chemist, I can be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, but we have to do a better job of telling those stories. And that's why when I came in here, I was joking with you about when are you getting into the short films and the docuseries, because I think it takes an element of people with that equity lens who do this type of work like Mojo Up does to say, this is a story we want to tell, exactly what you're doing right now. The more we can push these things out there to our social media platforms, the more we can expose these kids to these types of professions. I think we'll see a different desire for them to go into these fields.
And when you're looking back, actually, I'm going to ask that question next. So the challenge of the job. So like if you were categorizing like my biggest challenge or the hardest thing that I've had to learn, grow into, what has that been for you?
Not reacting to things like negative commentary. It's so sad to me. I grew up in a fairly conservative Christian home, and my parents taught us that not everyone has had the same opportunities you're going to have. Not everyone was raised the same way, but you still need to be patient and understand that other perspectives have value. And so I've always been one to try to come across lines of difference, to hear when I've messed up or when I've said something wrong, But we're in a society right now where people are pretty polarized, right? Like you have people on one extreme and the other. Everybody's yelling at each other. There's a lack of civility and a lack of willingness to have civil conversations just to hear the other perspective. That has been one of the most difficult things about doing this work in this day and age. And you have to be incredibly measured and patient and not reactive. My boss, who he was my VP of HR at Notre Dame, he said, Karrah, one of the things that you got to work on, this is when I was a young professional, he said, you have to be dispassionate in some of your responses. And he said, and that doesn't mean that you're not passionate about it, but it's the way that you respond in the moment. You have to learn how to be dispassionate in the moment, not take it personally. And I had to work on that. I had to really cultivate that skill. And I will tell you,
that's hit me right now.
Behind the scenes, sometimes Connie and others on my team, they know that I will like tell them like, I'm sick of this, I'm fed up. But in the moment when I'm in the room with the governor or the cabinet or legislators who are really not seeing what I'm trying to get them to see, I have to learn to be pretty dispassionate with my responses and stay measured in the moment. And then go behind the scenes with my backstage folks and say, look, I'm about to lose it. We got to talk about this.
That's interesting because I know part of that legislation is really about the future of this position.
For sure.
You know, because it's not grandfathered in. Talk to me about what has to happen for this position to not be a fad.
Yeah.
It's a long-term thing.
Well, we're operating under executive order right now, which means that the next governor could come in and just, get rid of the initiative. And so we're working with state budget and the governor's team to look at how we codify this work into legislative statute, whether that's through its own separate legislation at some point, or whether that's through just getting it codified through state budget. And I think the approach that we're going to take right now is looking at least getting this into state budget, because right now we're operating under private dollars, which is great. We want those private dollars to continue to come in, but we also want to have a line in the state budget to show its worth to the state. And that's the focus of this next upcoming legislative session.
When you start talking about politics, what did you have to learn about politics? Because even people ask me like, we're the largest Black-owned marketing agency and we're growing and scaling, and people are like, Travis, what are you working on? What are you learning? Like, what are you trying to figure out? I'm like, I'm trying to figure out the politics. And politics in my world is, who calls the shots, who's making the changes, how do you get into these big bids? There are companies that do equivalent work, they're getting 3-4 year contracts and we're getting a 30-day. We're trying to figure out all of that. In your role, what did you have to figure out?
I had to figure out when to acquiesce, like when it was okay to say, yep, that's
a big word.
Well,
okay,
when I had to say, I'm going to compromise and let that person take the lead on this, or I'm going to compromise and not try to put that initiative forward right now, that can wait for 2 years. Those are the things you have to learn in politics, because you're not going to get everything you want in the moment, but you have to figure out what are the most important things that I feel like I'm going to walk away from this and say, okay, that was a win. But what are the things that I'm going to have to let go of? And that's critical in politics. And also the other piece of it is just relationship building. You have to have good relationships with people who are making the decisions around what's going to get funded, what's not going to get funded, what's going to get the manpower for a certain initiative. And you have to figure out how to work those things out behind the scenes. And that can be really daunting, especially for someone like me. I came out of higher education. Higher education can be very touchy-feely, like we're all here to kumbaya and research and learn and expand our minds. And politics is very different. And not everybody is cut out for politics. And I don't know that I am. I think that for this time frame, it's been really good, but I don't know that I'm someone who would want to be a lifelonger in politics.
Does it make you cold or callous or unpassionate, or
it makes me less fun? I will tell you that. So I was with my sister, who's a musician. She plays for a number of folks, but her and one of her best friends, our friend Joy, who is Beyonce's drummer, they played for Ari Lennox a few weeks ago, and we were all together because I was hanging out with them. And they said, what's the biggest change? And I said, I'm just not as fun as I used to be. I will be honest with you. I used to be really let's go out, let's party, let's do this. But in politics, any picture of you doing something crazy or any video or any comment could be taken out of. So I have to be really measured even outside of the office. And that changes a person.
Is it exhausting to always be on?
It is. It is exhausting to be on. It's why when people ask me, what do you do for fun? I'm like, I have parties at home with my friends. I have people over. We hang out in the privacy of my own home because I don't want to be out where people are, because I'm constantly in the public eye. And it's at just the state level. Think about people that do this at the federal level, or that, they have this international brand. That is a lot. And so I think that's changed me a bit. I'm not as fun as I used to be, which makes me sad.
Before we move on to our Mojo Up hot seat, I got one last question, and I think it's one that I'm starting to bear a little bit.
Wait, this isn't the hot seat? I feel like I was already in the hot seat.
No, hot seat is it's rapid. But here's the question: is I've started to feel a little bit of pressure in my role as kind of like that first and only in my space, in my lane, to try to build something that has to go on beyond me.
For sure.
Right? It's not about making money or dollars, but it's about creating this opportunity and paving the way for other people to come behind.
That's right.
And it started to feel a little bit heavy, with doing that. Like, your role's got to have that aspect. I'm not saying it does, but to me, it feels like that would have to be a part of that. How are you handling that? And at the end of the day, like, what do you want people to really understand that allows this to become legacy?
So, to the first part of your question, I feel the same pressure every day because if you know this, Travis, if we get it wrong, we can mess it up for the next person that looks like us to have a similar opportunity or to thrive in a similar space. And so that pressure is there because you know that however you answer a question in a meeting or however you show up for that bid or whatever it is, you know that there's a lot riding on that. And I'm a firm believer that when we have opportunities like what you and I have had to be the first or the biggest or the only, that we have a responsibility to create that space for those coming behind us. That's a big task. It's a big task, but I'm signing up for it. I would say the legacy that I hope people understand is there with this work is that Indiana is a place where people can thrive who look like us. People can thrive who come from varying backgrounds, different geographic locations, but it's going to be an intentional effort on all of our parts to do the work, right? Business owners are going to have to do the work. People in the corporate space, nonprofit, the philanthropic space, government, we're all going to have to work together to make this place what I believe it can be. And that is a place where all have the opportunity to thrive and all of us have access to the tools we need to live our best quality of life. That's the legacy I'm hoping we're building. And I think we will get there. It's going to take some time. Some of the work that we're doing right now, I won't get to see the fruits of that labor in this moment, but I know, 15, 20 years from now, there are young people and families that will benefit from the seeds we're planting today. So I'm excited about it. I think we're headed in the right direction.
Well, I'm excited about it for you and for everybody that gets to be on the receiving end of the fruit.
Yeah.
And whether that's now, whether that's 5 years or 10 years, there's going to come a point in time you get to look back and say, like, we were doing something, and hopefully it continues. And so we get to see that lived out in our kids, and our kids' kids.
I hope so.
All right, so the hot seat is simply this. I got some questions here, one word or phrase, and all you're going to do is give a one word. You can give a phrase example. Okay. So like the first one is, and they're simple, but the first one's like your favorite place to vacation.
London.
Favorite city you've ever been to?
Oh, Dublin, Ireland.
The hidden small town gym in Indiana.
Hidden small town gym in Indiana. Oh, I would say French Lick.
Favorite restaurant?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I have a favorite restaurant. Currently, maybe there's this place up in South Bend called Soho. They have delicious Japanese noodles and all types of the really good delicious stuff that they cook on the Bic. Hibachi grill. They do all in front of you. That's
favorite meal you're going to cook?
Oh, my favorite meal that I'm going to cook. If it's based on my family, they would say they love my pot roast and carrots and potatoes. If it's based on me, I just love tacos, so I cook tacos.
Favorite brand?
Favorite brand?
Or brand you love?
Oh my gosh, I love Chanel. One day I'll be able to afford it. I can't afford it working in state government right now.
Favorite kind of shoes?
Favorite shoes, probably, that sounds hilarious to people, but I would say Skechers because I can get them at Meijer and they're very comfortable.
Hey, everybody's got their own, right? Favorite sports team?
Favorite sports team used to be the New York Giants. I would have to say right now because I am so a fan of Lamar, it's going to have to be the Baltimore Ravens.
Favorite college?
Purdue, Boiler Up, baby.
Favorite TV show?
Oh gosh, favorite TV show. Currently I'm watching something called Tell Me Lies on Hulu. I love that show. It's a hot mess, but I love it.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie, Imitation of Life. It's a movie from the 1950s. It's really good. You should watch it if you haven't.
Favorite kind of music?
Country music. Everybody knows that about me. I know.
So what's your hype song?
My hype song would definitely be Rihanna. Diamonds just gets me in like the go, and then Coldplay. Any Coldplay song gets me hype.
Nonprofit or charity work?
Nonprofit or charity work. I'm a big fan of United Way.
And at the end of the day, when it's all over, your dash is complete. What do they say about you?
She was a bridge builder who wanted to make life better for others, and she was a servant. I just want to serve. That's all.
Well, Karrah Herring, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank
All right, let's go.
you.
Where is it? She's got to finish it. Let's go. All right, she gets to wrap it up.
Yay! I love this. One day I knew I was going to be in Hollywood. Boom.
It's a wrap.